Guess who's back? Back again. Shady's back. Tell a friend. So I'm back again with another episode. I believe this is episode 6, if my memory serves me correct. I did attempt to make one during the week as kind of a half podcast, half video, but I just kept it as a video because I don't think it really worked as an audio only experience. This should be an interesting test of the windshield on my microphone because now there's a stiff southeasterly breeze. But I'll do my best to stay out of it. The sun was splitting the clouds now when I was leaving my house in beautiful Fir House, and I've come towards the city centre. Having a stroll around and maybe I might see something interesting. It's quite overcast though now that I've come to the city centre. Still balmy, humid weather, but also, judging by the forecast for the rest of the week, it's going to get quite moist, to put it lightly. So I said I'd best get out and enjoy the dry weather while I can. I was also going to possibly record this earlier this morning because it was a lovely morning, but I decided I was going to wait till after the Formula 1 Grand Prix race, F1, Barcelona, what am I talking about? Because I would have just been pre-guessing and, going off the hype of qualifying, which was very interesting, but I'll save the Formula 1 talk for the end of the old podcast, because I know not everyone loves an L Formula 1 race. Shite, I missed they closed. I was going to get a coffee as my first port of call. Is this cafe closed? What does the sign say? Oh, they're still open. Good, okay. Hello, how are you? Good. Can I get an Americano, please? Thanks very much. Cheers. Here we are now. An unnecessarily large cup of coffee for this hour of the day. I've already had a couple, more than a couple, I think, already today. Well, one of them was a tea. Plenty of caffeine. But because I went into a Starbucks because just being Dublin city centre and the strange way it's operated, all the smaller independent coffee shops who serve caffeine in human-sized portions are closed, and they close at stupid o'clock on a Sunday because it's only just gone 4:30, and most of them are closed. Anyway, off the topic. Did I see anything interesting on the way in here today? I saw I'm not sure if it's a 9912 or a 9911 GT3. It's red, a guard's red one. It's on UK plates. It's 2018, so I'm going to assume that's a 9912. Anyway, yeah, it's in a driveway that's on my route into town. It's always been my route into town, be it the bus or bicycle or car or whatever. And the gentleman who owns it, he seems to swap out the GT3 for a Megane 275 Cup S every few weeks or so. So you must have them registered up north or something somewhere, because they're always on UK plates. And he's had an interesting selection of cars over the years. B5 RS4, M6 Grand Coupe, what else he had? Mark 5 R32, amongst others. But yeah, the GT3 might be peak driveway for that man. I've never actually met him because I've never actually seen him in person. But I wouldn't mind bending his ear. He obviously enjoys a motor vehicle. And what else did I see? I saw a Daimler Super 8. If you're not sure what that is, it's essentially I can't remember the X, whatever, the circular light, the last generation circular light Jag XJ, but with Daimler badges on, because it's got some coach work done to it. It's an extended wheelbase, very extended wheelbase. It's got the 4.2 litre V8 with I think 400 horsepower, and some of the coolest OEM wheels you'll see on a modern car, kind of a monoblock-esque style wheel. And then in one of the houses very close where it's parked, it's street parked, and it's missing its centre caps on its wheels, and it's a bit dirty, but I think it might be in daily use, which is cool. But it's parked outside, near enough to a house anyway, and it also has a gold Bentley Arnage. I think it's an Arnage anyway, so I'm going to assume they're owned by the same person. If not, an interesting street. Speaking of similar-ish cars, there's a nice V8 Land Cruiser. So I'll just take a picture of that now. I've mentioned it. It's a bit of a distance away, but you'll understand when you see it. Here's my camera. Zoom. I don't have a Galaxy S. Was it the S20 or whatever? The one with where you can essentially take pictures of the surface of the moon. I'm on one of the more budget Samsungs. So much so it won't even focus. Focus, you bastard. You might have to just take my word for it. Why won't it focus? Oh, you bastard. there, use the native camera. I was trying to use the, I have an Ep.5 for the nerds out there, of the Google Pixel camera. It's a better, there's a 997, 911 down parked behind that Land Cruiser. Right, I'll go closer. But I finished what I was saying about my camera. Yeah, I have a Google Pixel Ep.5 on my Samsung phone, because the Pixel camera has some more features to it, but it doesn't exactly work bug-free on a non-Google Pixel phone. But now I'm going to come closer because there's a 911 parked behind it, and I'll take some better photos. But yeah, cars I saw on the way in. During the week, actually, as I was going to say, speaking of people with similar-ish cars, that man with his Bentley and his Daimler Super 8. Earlier in the week, it may have been Bank Holiday Monday, I saw a red Lexus LC500H, which is a fantastic looking car. As I say, it was red, which wouldn't be my first colour, but it even still managed to look well in red. Red with a tan interior. I had a lovely palindrome registration plate. 202D202, I think it was. And then a few days later, I saw another red LC5. Sorry, excuse me, I burped, caffeine burp. Then I'm going to take a photo of this V8 Land Cruiser and this 997 Carrera, which I shall put on the gram. Yeah, another LC500H, and I'm talking maybe half a kilometre from where I saw the other one, and it was red. But it was wearing a different registration, 172, something or other. So then I just assumed, oh, well, that one I saw in the week must have just had, because it was parked outside a dealership. They were just, some show plates that they have for their forecourt. Then I Googled both registrations, and apparently they're two different cars. So yeah, two red Lexus LC500Hs within spitting distance of each other. This Carrera has those cool wheels that I don't know the name of, and that were only available in the 997 generation. I believe possibly you could get them in 996s as well. They're a 5-spoke. You'll see it in the picture I put up. They're a 5-spoke with like bits cut out of them, obviously, to maximise the unsprung weight of the wheel. I assume they're magnesium. I think they have a magnesium coat on them there. They're a cool wheel anyway. This is a manual S, a 996, 2006. Would that be Gen 2? So about my years, but that might just be the perfect car. It's got a black interior, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'd probably go for something a little more vibrant, maybe. Silver 997 Carrera S manual, the rear wiper, no sunroof. Yeah, that might be the perfect car. There's a bit of misting on the rear window, or the rear light, rear passenger side light, but it's a German car. Now I've gone off. Now the wall over there says "kill me" on it. It's a bit much. Yeah, I've kind of gone off track now of where I was going to go. I'll just wander down this street and see what happens. I'm really going rambly now, haven't I? I haven't even got into any of the topics I was going to talk about, other than shit that I've seen. Oh, another thing I saw on the way in, actually. I saw a rather lovely manual silver E39 BMW 5 Series 520i cloth interior. Now, like, if you want to, if you've been listening to this podcast, you can clearly hear I am a super genius when it comes to cars. So if you want my expert knowledge, I'd say, buy E39 5 Series is now, because like that one that I saw on the way in, the silver one in that spec, that must be worth close to $5,000, I'd say. In other news, I currently have a black E39 5 Series on my driveway that is looking for a new owner. Now, admittedly, my one doesn't have a water pump in it at the moment, so we'll call it 4750, and first come, first served. No, all joking aside, the E39 is still for sale. It still doesn't have a water pump, and I would rather sell it to someone because I really don't want to scrap it. So yes, I'm still open to offers if someone wants to take on a project car. Is this a fancy Corolla? It's got twin exhausts and it's an Auris. My apologies. It's got twin pipes and a leather interior. I don't know enough about the Toyota Auris to really care, and I'm sure you don't either. I did mention this in that video that I made during the week, but then didn't turn into a podcast. The Ferrari 812 Competizione, and which we knew that car was on the way, we just didn't know the name of it because they showed us some pictures of it the previous week. But then they also launched the 812 Competizione A, the A standing for aperta, which stands for open in Italian, so open roofed. And yeah, what a crazy car. I think it's 950 horsepower. Is that what they're saying? Or is it 850? Anyway, ridiculous horsepower from a naturally aspirated V12, which I believe redlines at 9,500 RPM. And I think the peak power comes in at about 9. Looks better than the standard A12, A12, whatever you want to call it. I'm not hugely enamored by the way the 812 looks. I think the F12 was a better looking car. I think the 5.9 was a better looking car. The 550/575 was better looking, etc., etc. Anyway, it's going to be an absolute beast. It has these square exhaust pipes pushed right out to the sides to some sort of blown diffuser, crazy aerodynamics, and it's a naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari that's going to rev out to 9,500 RPM, and who doesn't want that in their lives? And you'd have to assume as well, this will be the swan song for the naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari. I would assume Ferrari will continue to offer V12 cars, but they will no doubt be hybrid assisted, I'd imagine. Possibly turbocharged, dare I say. What else has happened? The Cupra Leon has been launched. So the Seat Leon, this is now the sub-brand Cupra version, so the sporty version of the Leon. I'm still not down with Cupra as a sub-brand generally. They should have just kept them as Seat, so I don't really see what they did. But anyway, that's beside the point. Good looking car. The standard car looks well. Adding the sporty additions to it makes it look even better. I don't think there's any, it's 245 brake, which I think is the same as the Golf GTI in standard guise anyway. Because it used to be the Cupra, you might lose a little bit in interior qualities and toys on the inside. But what they made up for it was they used to give it extra power, but I think it's the same. But the thing is, the sterling price, I think it starts at like 31 something. The base price, it cuts $2,000 off the cost of a Golf, and it's a better looking car. It'd be nice to see if they did like what they did with the Formentor, the Cupra Formentor, and maybe offer in VZ5 guys, offer the 5-cylinder, the Audi 5-cylinder engine. Probably not, because it would shit all over the Golf. But maybe, maybe a run-out model when it comes to the end of its lifespan. Maybe they'll stick it in for the crack. We shall see. What else? Bristol, old. Anyone who knows? Well, actually, you might not know who Bristol are. Bristol Car Company, small, independent, British luxury and sports car manufacturer, I suppose you would put them, with a bit of a interesting ownership experience over the last few decades. Some people absolutely love them. Some people think they're the worst cars in the world. They certainly were more notable back in, say, like the 50s, 60s, and maybe even the early 70s. Then they kind of got a bit obscure. You never saw them on Top Gear because Clarkson was quite public about how terrible he thought they were, and therefore the owner of the company said he would never let Clarkson drive his cars, or anyone who's associated with Jeremy Clarkson. Although I do think the Bristol Fighter was on Top Gear. I think Hammond drove it. Anyway, getting off topic a little bit. So someone has bought the Bristol name, some independent, because they've been kind of. I don't think it was announced that the company closed its doors up until a couple of years ago, but they hadn't really done anything in about a decade, and someone's after buying the intellectual property and the name. So they're bringing Bristol back, and initially they're going to bring back the Fighter, the Speedster, and the 411, all in classic combustion engine form. And before then, they're going to go move on to a brand new Bristol, which will be, unsurprisingly, an electric vehicle. But I'm happy enough to see Bristol come back. I think the Fighter is cool. I think the Fighter was originally supposed to have the V10 from the Dodge Viper and gull wing doors. But cool, yeah. I think I think they're so eccentric, Bristol, that I think they're a good addition to have back in this very staid and anodyne world we're living in as car enthusiasts. So more of Bristol. And speaking of British sports cars, Rashford are coming back. Again, a small volume sports car maker from Britain back in the day. They haven't really been around in recent years, but the name has been bought back, and the company is being revived by the very busy post-F1 career Jenson Button, who seems to have his fingers in every pie. He's involved, as is your man Ant Anstead, who you'd probably know from various TV shows, including Wheeler Dealers and a few other things. But they have signed up with Lotus to develop the cars. So they'll be using Lotus technology, as in chassis and chassis setup and stuff like that, which, if there's one thing Lotus do very well, it's a good chassis and a good handling sports car. So that has to be promising. Especially since they haven't fully divulged what the first car is going to be, but Jenson Button was quite public in saying he wants to capture the essence of Rashford of old, and etc. etc. So the fact that they're getting involved with Lotus as well, you'd have to assume it's going to be a combustion engine sports car with Jenson Button doing the chassis setup, and then when you're on Anstead, making some engineering decisions, that could be an interesting car. Look forward to that. Lotus seem to be, now that Lotus are going into this new phase, they're going to build their last quote unquote combustion engine car with the soon-to-be Emira, which I talked about in my last podcast. But they've said the other day, or possibly just today, that they're willing to sell out by license the intellectual property to stuff like the platform that underpinned the Elise and Exige. So that could be a great opportunity for some small independents to get some pre-bought engineering, intellectual property, and R&D that's well proven, which is one of the biggest costs when it comes to setting up a startup car company. So if some small manufacturers want to get out and give people some, like, somewhat, maybe some form of resto mod, or back to basic sports cars, that could be a good way to enter into the business. Oh, just put into my mind some other stuff that I saw during the week. I saw a red Ferrari 612. I love the 612. I wouldn't personally have a red one. I wouldn't have any red Ferrari, but still a great looking car to see. It just gets better with age. Plus, your man he put bigger wheels on it. I think they look like 360 Challenge wheels, possibly. Challenge Stradale wheels, but anyway, they suit the car, because the standard wheels in the 612 are quite small. That was delightful to see. I'd like to think it was a manual, which is unlikely, but in my head it will be, and it will remain that way until I maybe see it again and I find that it isn't. And I also saw a Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit in town during the week. And it was purple, which was amazing. And then I saw the guy who owned it get into it, and I don't say an elderly gentleman, but a man in his latter middle ages, and he's wearing like a psychedelic T-shirt, and he's like funky white, green, and blue sneakers and stuff. So there's a pigeon taking a shit right in front of me. All right, pal. But that was cool to see. So that's all I'm going to bog on about of what I've seen and what's really gone on in the car world since the last spoke to you. So now let's talk about the Formula One. So going into the race, it certainly was a tantalising prospect, because the qualifying times, so Lewis Hamilton managed to bag himself his 100th pole position, which gives the man a 37% hit rate in his career, which is staggering. And obviously he's only beating his own records now, but he's the first person to make triple digits when it comes to pole positions. But he only managed to squeeze pole by 0.036 of a second from Max Verstappen in second. And then Valtteri Bottas was third. Charles Leclerc, again pulling another storm out of the bag, was fourth. And I can't remember who was in fifth, possibly Norris. Oh no, Ricardo out-qualified Lando Norris. Sixth was possibly Sainz and blah, blah. Anyway, I think Prez was seventh, right? Anyway, so that was the qualifying. And it was, so that was really shaping up to be, it's certainly going to be a competitive race looking at the times, because I think from first to 15th was something only separated by something like 1.1 seconds, which is always a good sign of an exciting race, even if the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, is not the best one for racing. It's a very difficult track to overtake on. It was looking interesting. Anyway, so the start of the race, Max positioned his car just within the limits of what is allowed in his grid box. And then he pulled off a blinder of a start, got up alongside Lewis, and got a little bit of a slipstream off, and then pulled out, and then was late on the brakes, and he really pushed Lewis wide, and it was very close. It was a brave move. You'd only want to attempt a move like that on someone like Lewis Hamilton, knowing he'll be sensible enough to not take his boat out of the race. It was within the limits of legality. It was a punchy move by Max, but completely within his rights, and he managed to take the lead and hold on to the lead. He did then, managing to keep Hamilton outside of the 1 second drag reduction system limit, meaning he just had to keep the gap and just manage things from the front. And with Lewis Hamilton then following him around in the dirty air, he was really starting to wear out his tyres and get blisters and stuff. So it was looking good. So then when it came to the pit stops, Red Bull pulled the trigger first to go for the undercut. It was a very, very late call. So when Max came into the pits, they weren't ready for him, but even as he was pulling into his grid box, the left rear tyre wasn't ready for him. So the pit stop was 4 seconds, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's a long stop in a Formula One race these days, when they're managing, especially Red Bull, actually, who are known for doing sub 2 second pit stops on a regular basis. So that looked like, because he went into the pits only, say just over a little bit over a second ahead of Lewis. So that looked like that could have been what decided the race. Lewis then decided to stay out for a few more laps longer, because he felt like his tyres were up for it. Even though he was having some issues, he seemed to drive through them. But whatever happened anyway, by the time Lewis pitted and came back out again a few laps later, the gap was actually up to nearly 5 seconds between himself and Max. The worrying part though was how quickly then Lewis clawed back that 5 second gap, and he was back within DRS range, I think within 2 or 3 laps. And this time around, rather than in the first stint, he couldn't quite get into the 1 second, and being in that dirty air was really affecting the performance of his car. This time around, he was definitely having a better effort. He was able to get within the second with a charge lap to recharge his electrical recovery system and to charge up his batteries to get the extra bit of assistance down the straights. So he'd have to take a lap, and then he was able to get within the 1 second and then use DRS, but he just wasn't quite able to get close enough to make the overtake. And again, he started chewing up his tyres. So it really looked like Max was going to be able to manage the race, and Lewis really didn't necessarily have an answer. But then, looked like out of nowhere, something we weren't expecting, Lewis pitted again and went for a 2-stop. So he came in because he had enough of a gap back to I think it was Leclerc, who was still in 4th, and he was able to get back out in 3rd, and then Valtteri Bottas was in 2nd, so that wasn't necessarily going to be a problem. And then chase after Max, and chase after him, it was definitely what he was going to do, because as soon as he came back out from that 2nd stop, he started absolutely chewing into Max's lead. He was lapping 1.7, 1.8 seconds a lap quicker than him, with a gap. Well, as I say, Red Bull had an opportunity to cover off Mercedes when they decided to pit Lewis for the 2nd time. But they literally had to make the decision within half a lap. Do they give up track position and pit and get fresher tyres, or do they stay out and see if they can make it to the end? Because the gap after Lewis pitted was about 23 seconds, and it's about 22 to 23 seconds to make a pit stop in Barcelona, all things going well, and their first stop didn't go perfectly for Red Bull, so they decided not to pit him and then just stay out. And then all of a sudden you could see Lewis's pace, and he just started eating into the lead, eating. Valtteri, firstly actually, Nikita Marzipan, yet again, after impeding Lando Norris in qualifying and getting a slap on the wrist for that, he then ignored blue flags for Lewis coming up behind him, which actually called Toto Wolff, team manager of Mercedes, to get onto the team radio. When I say team radio, get onto race control and go tell Michael Massey, who's the race director, get this guy out of the way, he's going to cost us the race. Which is, I think, the first time I've ever heard a call to race control over the public feed. We actually got to hear that, which I'd never heard that before. More of that, please, Formula One, because that was cool. But it turns out it didn't make much of a difference. Lewis just reeled in, just lap after lap. He was just taking chunks of time out of Max. Then Mercedes pitted Bottas again because, first actually Lewis caught up with Valtteri, and over the radio Valtteri was told, look here, Lewis is fighting for the lead here, don't hold him up. Valtteri didn't exactly jump out of the way, put it this way. Yeah, he didn't make it very easy for Lewis to get by. He lost about half a tenth trying to get by Valtteri. But again, it didn't really make a difference. He eventually then caught up with Max. DRS down the straight. Max did his best to kind of break the slipstream by weaving a bit within the limits on the pit straight, but Lewis had him. And then once Lewis took the lead, that was it. Unless something terrible happened to Lewis, which as history shows doesn't happen often, the race was his. This season's going to go down to a lot of the things if it stays as it is. So stuff like fastest lap points and those 3 races that are coming up with qualifying races where you'll get 3 points for first, 2 for second and 1 for third. Those extra points that are knocking around could be the make or break of the championship. So they brought Max in near the end, put him on some fresh tyres because there was enough of a gap back to third. And back to Valtteri Bottas for him to get in, get a fresh set of boots and get the fastest lap time, which he did. But Lewis Hamilton proving his worth yet again, unbeatable. Fair play to him. It's a sad result, but we'll have to just see how it goes, because the Mercedes definitely was the faster race car this weekend. They had a little bit in qualifying, but then race pace was just on a different level. So hopefully that's on a marker now for the rest of the season. So hopefully it will still maybe switch back to Red Bull at some tracks. But I don't know. I feel this is a bit ominous. That this is the turning point, and it's so early in the season that Mercedes and Lewis, pick up this momentum and just run with it. Lewis seemed very, very positive after qualifying. He seemed very positive after the race, as he should be, because yeah, it's just another absolute display of absolute dominance. But congratulations to him and the team. But yeah, a great race, I must say. It was a really enjoyable race regardless. It was a really strategic race. It was tight, especially the opening stint with Lewis and Max, because they were just going absolutely flat out, and just like a second in it. I wouldn't say it was quite as exciting as, say, Imola 2005, Schumacher and Alonso, where they were just stuck to each other for lap after lap. But it was still to an outsider, it wouldn't have seemed maybe so entertaining. But for us hardcore fans, I think it was a spectacle, and it was exciting. It was edge of your seat stuff. Okay, what else? Well, I'll rattle through some of the other drivers then, and give my 2 cents on the rest of the performances. And before I say that, there's a nice 3-door E30 BMW, which I'll take a photo of with Graham. Let me get the results up here so I can rattle through them. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible, because as we've seen in the past, I can really ramble on when it comes to the F1. Yeah, so Lewis Hamilton won the race. He ended up winning the race by 15 seconds, but obviously Max did make that late pit stop. Max was second. Disappointing day for him. He did his best to hold on to the lead for as long as possible, but it was inevitable in the end. Bottas came into the weekend after the Daily Mail, which fuck anything that's comes out of the Daily Mail that isn't double verified by some actual legitimate sources, but they printed a story saying he's going to get booted out of the team midway through the season and replaced by George Russell, which I would have first said there's no chance of that happening mid-season, but I don't know, the fact he didn't jump out of the way for Lewis when asked to. Things don't seem perfectly rosy at Mercedes for Valtteri, so maybe he knows more than we do. But you'd have to say he really is being made a fool of yet again by Lewis Hamilton, which I hate to say. I hate to use such a word. Look, most people wouldn't be made a fool of by Lewis Hamilton, but yeah, I don't know. How long can Valtteri be the quite clearly number 2 driver? He's a good driver, but I don't know, is Mercedes the right place for him? At least, George is young and early in his career. He could play second fiddle to Lewis maybe for a season or two until maybe he decides to retire, and then George could take over as team leader, but I don't think Valtteri has that luxury. But yeah, like I said, he did at least break up the Red Bulls by finishing third, although I'm sure Mercedes would have loved a 1-2. Then Charlie Leclerc, another absolute great weekend from Charles Leclerc, pulling the absolute maximum out of that Ferrari. Qualified fourth and he finished fourth, but he was running third for a bit. He was ahead of Bottas and he pulled a great move on him at the start. Bottas had to take a bit of evasive action when Max and Lewis were battling, but even still, Charles took a level head and just kept the car clean, and he pulled a nice move on Bottas going into, I think, turn 3. Is that an E46 M3? It's in white. It's very hard to tell sometimes with those E46 M3s because it's very, very easy to make a fake one. I'll take a picture of it anyway, and then you guys can tell me. I'll know by the sound of it actually. I'll do a video, so then we'll know for sure. Yep, it's a real one. You can hear it by the sound, which is nice. I don't think I've ever seen a white one. That might have been wrapped. Let me know. Could you get the E46 M3 in white? Maybe you could. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about Formula 1 drivers. Perez, 5th for Perez. What to say about his weekend? He didn't qualify very well. I can't remember exactly where he qualified. I think it might have been 7th or 8th, which wasn't great. He had a bit of a scruffy Q3. He ruined one of his outlaps. He went wide onto the gravel and chewed up a set of tyres by locking them up. And then the race was he was a bit nowhere really, wasn't he? He pulled it great actually. He might have pulled out the best overmade taking move of the race. He went around the outside. Who was that against? Shit. Was it Ricardo? Yeah, sorry, Ricardo. He overtook Daniel Ricciardo around the outside going into 2 and 3, I think it was. It was a great move anyway. But fifth is a bit, considering his teammate finished second. He's doing okay. He's not quite at the distance Max's 2 previous teammates were at. Gasly obviously had a terrible little time at Red Bull and Albon. Well, he showed some great potential. He wasn't consistent enough. So Perez isn't quite that bad, but he's not quite as close as I think Red Bull would want him to be. It's still early days, but they need him in there in the mix to try and take points away from Mercedes, and it's particularly Lewis Hamilton. But 5th isn't isn't the worst, but you know, there is one of the Ferraris ahead, which, you know, if the Red Bull is the first or second quickest car, depending on how you see the weekend, or how you see each race, him being behind one of the Ferraris is not acceptable. But I think there might be some interesting cars coming up here. There's an MX-5 anyway. I'll rattle through these Formula 1 drivers before I continue on. Then there was Daniel Ricciardo. Not a bad weekend from Daniel. It's the first weekend where he's completely outperformed Lando Norris. Norris didn't have a great weekend. He had some good showings in practice and in qualifying, but altogether I think he qualified 9th or something, 8th or 9th, and Ricciardo out-qualified him, and he also then beat Norris in the race. So not a bad weekend for Daniel Ricciardo, ahead of one of the Ferraris and ahead of his teammate. So he's slowly but surely gelling into the team, which is great because we all love Danny Rick, and you know, let's get rid of this pandemic for nothing other than this. We want to see Daniel Ricciardo smile again, because I'm sure he was smiling today after that performance, because it was pretty solid. And Carlos Sainz then in the second Ferrari, not a bad weekend for him. I think he qualified 10th and he finished 7th. So yeah, so he's been shown a clear set of boots by his hot property teammate Charles Leclerc so far. But it's early doors for Carlos so far, the team, and not a terrible day at the office. Again, ahead of one of the McLarens is decent enough, and he finished further up than he qualified, so not a terrible weekend. Lando Norris 8th again. He'll have want better than that, but you know, we're not going to write Norris off just because he's had one iffy weekend. But he could have got more out of it than that, but. Being the last of the kind of Ferrari and McLaren battle, which seems to be pretty solidified for third and fourth quickest cars on the grid, being the last of that quartet of cars won't have him pleased with himself, but I'm sure he'll just, he'll dust his shoulders off and keep on moving and on to the next one, which is Monaco. Well, speaking of the pandemic, actually, a little side note being out of the way, the Spanish Grand Prix did have 1,000 fans in the grandstands, socially distanced in the grandstands, but it was nice to see, and it added a small bit of atmosphere, even if it was far from a capacity crowd. It was good to see some people back at a race again. A little side note. Anyway, sorry, back to the drivers. Norris, Ocon, yeah, look, he finished a decent bit ahead of his double world champion teammate Fernando Alonso. I think Ocon qualified 5th, so to finish 9th kind of shows the car has more one lap pace than it does have race pace, but at least he picked up a couple of points and a decent weekend from Ocon. Gasly still managed to pull off 10th, which isn't too bad because the AlphaTauri didn't seem absolutely on the money this weekend, although it's been showing some good pace so far this season. Barcelona wasn't exactly playing to its strengths, and he only had a 5-second penalty because he overshot his grid slot at the start of the race. So to finish 10th and pick up a point, there was some good, interesting moments earlier on in the race between like Gasly, Alonso, Stroll, Vettel, all kind of like muscling around each other. There was some good overtaking further down the grid, but of course, because we were watching the lead battle, we didn't see a whole lot of it, which is why I would love to have access to the Formula 1 app, so you can switch between onboard cameras and different feeds and stuff, and we're not stuck with just the one standard feed and fucking David Croft fucking shouting stupid shit through the microphone. Not a bad showing from Pierre Gasly. He to pick up a point from what wasn't a particularly strong weekend for the team. Lance Stroll, Aston Martin's out of the points again. Just, I don't know, how does Aston Martin manage to drop off so badly after turning into Aston Martin from Racing Point, who had such a stellar season last year and the last few seasons, somewhat best of the rest, even though they finished 4th last year, but only because they had 15 points deducted off them, kind of fairly, whatever. But either way, to see them dropping down so far, they seem to be the worst affected by the floor regulations and the high rake design of their car. It's just outside the points. But he did beat Vettel again, only by a position. Kimi Räikkönen split the Aston Martins. Actually, got old man Kimi, who qualified quite high up. I can't remember exactly where he qualified, but he qualified relatively high up No, I think he qualified 10th or 11th. And then he had free choice of tyres, and he was the only person to start the race on the mediums, and he went really far into the race. And at one point he was 6th. But then when he came in and changed his tyres, he fell down the order. But yeah, not a bad result for Kimi in 12th, considering the Alfa Romeo isn't actually, it's not winning any awards this year. That's Kimi, and then Vettel. A better weekend from Seb. He seems to be kind of settling into the team and the car a bit better. He's basically on par with Stroll this weekend. Even though he was beaten by him by a couple of positions, but he showed his worth. He had some punchy overtakes at Seb. It looked like the car was actually chewing up his tyres, to be honest with you. The Aston Martin, it's not optimum, let's put it that way. Vettel, George Russell, I didn't even see that. He finished 14th, which isn't too bad now in the L Williams, outside the points, but he made it through to Q2 actually as well, to George Russell, which is a great showing from him. But not a bad weekend for the Williams, considering it was a windy weekend, and their aerodynamic package seems to be seriously hampered by crosswinds and stuff like that. So not a bad. The Williams finishing ahead of, for one, Giovinazzi, who was 15th in the Alfa Romeo, who I don't know why he slipped down the order so much, because did he out-qualify Kimi? He seems to have had the upper hand with Kimi over the last couple of races, but now he's down in 15th there. I don't 100% remember what happened to. We had a very slow pit stop because when they brought him in, the left front, when they brought it out to the car and put it on the ground, they realised it had no air in it. So they had to run in and change the tyres, and you can't just change one tyre. You have to change the whole set because they're all barcoded together. So that's obviously why Giovinazzi's so far down. That pit stop cost him it must have cost him at least half a minute, if not more. Then Nicholas Latifi, just one position behind George Russell. A much better weekend for Latifi than last week at Portimao, where he had an absolutely abysmal weekend. So not too bad from Nicholas Latifi there. He finished ahead of Alonso, although I do believe Alonso had some sort of power unit issues. He was on the radio saying he was having a misfire, and the team were saying, there is an issue up in the data. So I wouldn't write off Alonso there down in 17th, which if you just looked at the piece of paper here, you'd be like, oh God, that's a terrible weekend from a two-time world champion. But I think the car let him down there more than anything else. And then the two Haas's bringing up the rear. Mick Schumacher, who had a good qualifying. I think he qualified 15th ahead of a few drivers. But the race pace of the Haas came to a 4, and the last two finishing drivers. But again, he completely outgunned his Russian teammate Nikita Marzipan, who again had a fairly troubled weekend, blocking people, having team managers shout at race control about him over the radio, and he was spinning from his first lap in free practice. So another shite weekend from Nikita Mazepin in the Haas. I'm just glad to see Schumacher is showing up consistently every weekend, and Schumacher just seems to be getting better and better, and Marzipan just seems to be consistent at one thing, at being a gobshite. And then the only retirement from the race was Yuki Tsunoda, who didn't have a great qualifying, and he was a bit nasty about the car over the team radio, and he probably got a slap in the wrist from Franz Tost, the team manager, because then come this morning, Sunday morning, race morning, he was a lot more apologetic, but then yes, he broke down. I think it was only 2 laps into the race, which caused a safety car. Might have been more interesting at another track, but a safety car at Barcelona doesn't really cause an effect because it's a terrible racetrack to overtake on. But anyway, that's the Formula 1. The next race is in Monaco. I think it's a couple of weekends away. Monaco qualifying is usually more interesting than the Monaco race, because although you can't overtake at Barcelona, you really can't overtake, especially in these modern cars, in Monaco. But it's still the spectacle that we all know it's famous for, and obviously I'll still watch it. Red Bull tend to go well around Monaco, so hopefully, although it's a bit of an anomaly in the calendar, a nice weekend from Red Bull and someone other than Lewis Hamilton winning the race would be nice. But again, I'll just finish off with fair play to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, just showing what they do best again. Anyway, as you can see, I've sounded a little bit dejected because yes, the result of the race is not what I wanted as a biased fan, but in my unbiased journalistic hat on, it was a good race and fair play to those who took the spoils. So while I'm standing here, there's a couple of cars I've been looking at. There's a car which I've discussed many times and posted many times. It's a CLK 55 AMG, which is in daily use. It's a bit ratty looking. It's taxed and tested and wearing matching Bridgestones all around, so someone appreciates it. There's someone beating me on a pigeon. And here is a rather tasty NB MX-5, which is a little bit stanced, Joe, but it's a good colour. Okay, I'll start wrapping up now because my coffee is cold, so I'm must be talking for way too long. I'm going to head down one more laneway before I wrap up and sign off with y'all, because there might be some interesting cars down here. But I suppose while I walk down the lane, I suppose I'll take the opportunity to say thanks to everyone who has been listening to the podcast. I was going to continue making them even if no one was listening to them other than myself. But those who have been listening have been very kind and said plenty of nice things and given some constructive feedback, which is always good to hear. As I say, I'll keep making them, and thanks for all the nice words. They're just lovely now altogether. But yeah, I'll no doubt I'll be talking to you again during the week. I'll have a quick glance down this laneway if there's anything we haven't seen before, which we haven't. The usual stuff. It's not a weekday, so there's nothing out that we haven't seen before. It's the back alley to a certain infamous social media happy car dealership. Actually, I never noticed. So this SL that I've silver SL 500 or 129 I've put up a few times. I'm not going to put up another picture of it, but I just realised there's a big giant Concorde sticker on the windscreen. So I will take a picture of that because that's kind of cool, because sorely missed. I would love to have gone on Concorde. So I'll wrap up. No doubt I'll be back to you again during the week with some more ramblings and nonsense. But until then, stay safe, stay well, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.